From the land of frozen lakes, this is 10,000 Takes. Brought to you by Minnesota Score Radio. Wally and Eric back for yet another week as we slice and dice the always busy, always topical, super saturated Minnesota sports scene. Wally, we're going to start with the Timberwolves, who are on the West Coast, an extended trip to Cali, where they're going to play the likes of Golden State, the LA Clippers, the Lakers, and then Sacramento again. Some would call it California dreaming, but the way the T-Wolves are playing, it's more like California screaming. They are free-falling. They better get this thing fixed out there on the left coast.
Yeah, no question. By the way, did you just come from a wedding or a funeral? You're dressed up today. I like it. I like the outfit.
I'm burying the Timberwolves. I'm tagging their toe. Well, not yet. Let's see how the trip finishes.
Yeah, let's let this thing play out because, as you know, 3 wins in a row jumps you from the 9 or 10 spot all the way up to what, 4 or 5 even. But when you lose 3 in a row, you drop that far. That's because that's where the Western Conference is. But look, without Karl Anthony Towns, I'm laying the gauntlet down. If he doesn't come back, they're not going to the playoffs. Mark my words.
Well, I think there's a good chance that would happen, and they miss Cat. There's no doubt about it. He's one of their bell cow guys, he and Ant. But, they went out to San Francisco on Sunday night. There was no Steph Curry. There was no Draymond Green for Golden State. I don't think Andrew Wiggins played, and they still lost to that team.
That's a game they've got to win.
Exactly. Well, and then you go back to Charlotte, Washington. What's going to keep this team out of the playoffs, possibly, are those losses to the teams you're supposed to beat. The Rockets, the Pistons, the Magic, the Wizards at home. And, and to your point, it's a scrum in that Western Conference. Basically from that 4 or 5 seed down to 13 or 14, you got to have 10 or higher to get in. It's teams moving up and down the elevator constantly. So T-Wolves better they better get things going or they're going to be out of the playoff picture.
As my dad used to say to me, shape up or ship out.
Yeah.
And they might be shipping out.
And so, look, so much high hope and expectation going into this season. Definitely the Cat injury has put a damper on things. I don't want to minimize that. But, so let's assume the worst, that they don't make the playoffs. Then what's the T-Wolves spin? Well, you got to give us another year when Cat and Rudy G are on the floor together to see if the Twin Towers concept works. I think that's going to be what they're going to fall back on if they don't make the playoffs.
Well, and look, they've made 2 monstrous trades. One where they gave away their future for Rudy Gobert. So for them, the future is now, right? Is there any argument about that? I mean, within the next year or 2, if they don't win in the next year or 2, they're in trouble because they don't have first-round draft picks until, 2030, I think it is. It's ridiculous. It's a long ways off. So the flip side of that is the other deal that they made. They traded D'Angelo Russell. And as you well know, and as I have said many times before, I've never been a huge D'Lo guy running the point. But when they moved him to the 2, he's the off guard during January, the first part of February, when he was still a member of the Minnesota Timberwolves. He was pretty good. He was scoring. He gave them another option. They're missing that option right now. It's all on Anthony Edwards. And while he is super talented, he's an all-star, he has a time. He's still learning. It's only his 3rd year. And he hasn't been asked to do the type of things before that he's being asked to do right now. And he doesn't have a Karl Anthony Towns to lean on. They're coming after Anthony Edwards. He's getting their best defenders. He's getting double teams. What he has to learn is when to pass the basketball. That's part of the learning curve.
As he should, because it's his job now to carry this team, and I think you're right. He's not quite there yet to be able to put an entire team on his back. Like Kirby Puckett said back in the 91 World Series.
Climb on board.
Climb on my back. I'm going to take you to the promised land. Ant's not there yet. And what we see is a guy who's electric, he's acrobatic, he has, he doesn't want to take a night off, which puts him in rare air.
I love him for that.
Yeah, effort is part of his game, but he needs to take better shots, especially in crunch time, maybe distribute the ball to his teammates better, get everybody involved. So we're getting down to, the final stretch of this NBA regular season. And if Minnesota somehow misses the playoffs, and remember, there's 10 teams in each conference. 20 of the 32 teams will punch playoff tickets. Mathematically, it's harder to miss then get in, right?
Right,
I
yeah.
mean, so there's no excuses. I know you miss Cat, but you got to find a way.
I don't know, man. I still think without Karl Anthony Towns, this is going to be a tough road to hoe. The Lakers are better. I don't think there's any question about that. And look, they have got three former Minnesota Timberwolves in that lineup to go along with Anthony Davis and LeBron James, with Malik Beasley and with D'Lo and with who's the other one? Vanderbilt, Jared Vanderbilt. Jared Vanderbilt's the third one. Yeah,
D'Angelo.
Right, and those three guys are all they're all role players of some kind. Malik can shoot the three. Our guy D'Lo can drive and can shoot. And, of course, Vanderbilt's the ultimate go-getter, get rebounds, play defense. He's not going to give you much offense.
And that's part of the problem with the blockbuster deal that Tim Connelly orchestrated with Utah, gutting the bones of the Timberwolves. I remember when they got eliminated by Memphis in the play-in. They won the play-in game against the Clippers. Then round one, they get bounced in 6. They blew 3 double-digit leads in that series. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. But when I left Target Center, when they were eliminated in Game 6, my thought was this team's trending up. They need to tinker and tweak a few things, and they should get better. Instead, the new GM comes in and guts it.
He blew it up.
Yeah, and you lost a lot of your locker room and on-court energy. And a guy like Pat Bev, I mean, he thrived in Minnesota. So I think that's the other part about this deal that has really hurt this team, that I think the chemistry they had no longer exists. And even if Cat comes back, he and Rudy G still have to find a way to get into sync.
Yeah, and they had, 10 or 15 games together at the beginning of the season, whatever it was, maybe 20 games together. Not sure that was the number. They're going to have less than that to get it together to try and pull this team into the postseason and then make a postseason run. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I would not bank on it. If Cat isn't back in the next week or so, it's going to be really difficult.
And I wonder what Chris Finch said when Conley came to him and said, this is what we're going to give up to get Rudy G. I just can't imagine that Chris Finch was all on board with that. Remember, he was here before Conley.
Although, I will say this, coaches have to think in the short term.
Yeah.
General managers should be thinking in the long term. Coaches, as you know, man, they're hired to be fired. And Chris Finch probably looked at it and said, great, you're going to give me a big guy. I guess those draft picks in 2029 or whatever it is, that probably won't affect me. I doubt that I'll still be the head coach in 2029, but I've got Rudy right now. That could help us win. Well, and it's his job, obviously, to try and help figure out how they're going to make it work. Well, we'll see. They've got a long ways to go, and they're going to need Cat back. That's my bottom line. Without Cat, they're going nowhere.
He's been a stray cat most of the year.
Yes, he has.
Come on back, Karl Anthony Towns. Your basketball team needs you.
Yes, they do.
All right, a lot more coming up. We're going to talk about the debacle in Dinkytown, known as Minnesota Gopher basketball, for the men and the women. This is 10K Takes, your T-Wolves ticket. Taxes don't have to be taxing, not with Keller Tax Service. For over 20 years, Linda Keller has prepared taxes for all types of professions and businesses. She has perfected the virtual tax appointment through phone or video. With Keller Tax Service, you never leave home. Call Keller Tax Service at 320-352-0013 or check out Keller Tax Service online at kellertaxservice.com. Take the anxiety out of taxes with Keller Tax Service at kellertaxservice.com.
10,000 takes. going to talk some Gopher basketball now with former Gopher Richard Coffey. And the Gophers, as you know, Eric, have been a unmitigated disaster this year in Big Ten men's basketball, women's for that matter as well. And Richard joins us now. Richard, we talked before the season or early on during the season with you when we had you on the show, and we had this discussion about where they are going to be this year. And you pretty much nailed it, that they're going to struggle to win games in the Big Ten, and they have. Where do we go from here? Because, you lose the big recruit last week, the Dennis Evans kid, and it's not the end of the world, but year three's got to be better than year two for Coach Johnson, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you want to see, small progressions each season. I think we all knew that it would be a long road to get back to winning, especially the way he took over the program with, most of the players leaving between he and Patino. So I think we all expected it to be, an uphill battle. But I think we also probably expected more success than we've had.
Richard, fan bases are very impatient. They want to win yesterday. Shed some light on this, because you were around when Clem came in, and the first 2 years for Clem Haskins in the wake of a scandal with Jim Dutcher and all that, those were rough too. Minnesota was a doormat in the Big Ten, but Clem flipped the script. Now, can that happen with Ben, in your opinion?
So, yeah, I think we lost between 2 seasons. We lost 23 Big Ten games in a row. So,
wow.
He's in the middle of that. So I know exactly what they're going through and how much pressure it is. And you can feel that as a coach, and you can also feel that as a player. What my concern is for Ben and his coaching staff is the biggest difference in what we went through and what they're going through is the rules of the NCAA. See, back then, you couldn't transfer. When you commit to a team, you couldn't back out. You had to go. Once you signed that national letter of intent, you had to go to that program. That team did not have to release you if they didn't choose to, so you had to come. So when we came here to University of Minnesota, we were terrible our first 3 years, but no one left. Like, we didn't lose one player during that time, not one key player. A couple players left that weren't playing, but we didn't lose one key player. So we were able to build from year to year. Unfortunately for Ben, with the state of the game now and the new structure of it, players can leave and go play somewhere else right away. And I'm not saying I'm against that, but it does in this situation. It makes it hard to build a cohesive team and keep players around. And like the big guy that was supposed to come here as the top recruit, you say it's not the end of the world, but man, it's
you can see it from here.
It's a big loss for them, and I felt so bad for the program and for Ben when I heard that kid left, and unfortunately, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but they're probably going to lose some kids at the end of the season.
Yeah, that's the other thing I've been talking about. Eric and I have on the radio show and on television is this might not just be the only time that this happens. They might lose guys that they have right now. They might lose people that they are recruiting. They look at the record and they say, okay, what's our chances to get to the NCAA tournament? What's the NIL money look like? I mean, these are things that are factors now, which then, to me, puts more pressure on Ben to get into that transfer portal and bring guys in. He might have to bring in guys that are juniors and seniors and not worry about recruiting freshmen anymore, because that's may be his only way out to try and survive here for the next couple of years until he can get back on their feet. Agreed?
You have to bring in whoever you can.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care what class they are in. Like, you just have to bring in whomever are willing to come here, because you're right. Like, kids want to play in the NCAA tournament. They want to play on TV. Everybody coming out of high school, everybody coming out of junior college, these kids that are transferred from one school to the next, they all have the same dream. They think they're good enough to play in the NBA. And they know in order to have that opportunity that you need to get as much exposure as you possibly can. And the NCAA tournament is a big part of that. And unfortunately, again, with the way the rules are set up, it creates some instability because of the way kids can move around these days.
Richard, you have a son in the NBA, Amir Coffey. He played at Hopkins. Now he's with the Los Angeles Clippers, and he was also with the Gophers. You have a daughter in the WNBA, Mia, who played at Hopkins, went to Northwestern, now with the Atlanta Dream. And we were talking before the interview that there's a lot of pressure on these WNBA players to go overseas, hop the pond. That's where the money is. Any concerns given what happened to Brittany Griner? I realize that was an isolated incident. And, but do you think that the WNBA needs to find a way to create more revenue to keep these gals here in the States so they don't have to play, in another country in the off season?
Most definitely. Like I understand that the WNBA don't bring in the revenue or nowhere even close to it that the NBA does. But the NBA bring in enough revenue that if they really want this league to stay around and be successful, and if they really care about the players, they can support these girls with more money from a salary cap perspective, and not even miss that money. The next NBA TV contract that's coming out is freaking outrageous. Like $10 million per team for a salary cap for a WNBA team. The NBA would miss that because you're right. Like these girls are going overseas. Nia's been in the WNBA 6 years. She's been overseas each one of those years, and she hasn't had a break. And you do make more money overseas, but you have to play in the WNBA because that's what gets you to the nice contracts when you go overseas. That experience. So, she didn't go overseas this year, and I think she's just going to stop going overseas moving forward and just start focusing on internships in the winter and play the WNBA in the spring and summer because your body just can't take it. Like your body eventually is going to break down if you don't give it the proper rest, and that's what happens to a lot of these girls in the WNBA.
NBA, Timberwolves. It has been it's been a struggle of late, but particularly without Karl Anthony Towns. They make the trade. They send D'Angelo Russell away. We talked about it on our show again. What are your thoughts about what they're going to need to do? Do they have to have Cat to be a playoff contender this year? I certainly think so.
They were playing well without him before the trade.
Exactly.
I think the trade was a big part. Beasley is lighting it up in LA. Like he's doing well. And I think losing those two players, those two key players that takes a lot of shots when they're in the game or that handles the ball. So you lost those two players, and so you lose a lot of camaraderie with your team when you bring in new guys. You got those two players that handle the ball so much, and now you got to create a new tempo with the new guys, and one of your main ball handlers is gone, and Cat is out. So it's an adjustment, and I'm telling you, like there's some teams in the West that has really stacked up, like the Lakers, man. The Lakers are looking good, and it's going to be a battle for everyone. Hell, the Clippers are in a battle right now themselves.
No doubt. Well, and 3 of those Laker players, by the way, that are in the starting lineup are former Minnesota Timberwolves, and they were all part of that playoff team last year. Yeah.
And playing well, for the Lakers.
Yeah. Richard, appreciate your time. Thanks again, and we will talk to you again before this season is over.
Always a pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right. He is Richard Coffey, the former Gopher, former Minnesota Timberwolf, with us here on 10,000 Takes. Stay with us. More coming up after this.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years. I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earrings. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision, it's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
Welcome back. 10,000 Takes rolls along, and spring training rolls along. Minnesota Twins have been in camp and have been playing preseason games thus far. I know you said you hadn't caught any on television as of yet. I'm interested to watch how the little idiosyncrasies go for not only the Twins, but for just all of Major League Baseball with all these rules changes. Particularly, I think the one that stands out the most right now anyway is the pitch clock. Because now you're actually seeing the clock wind down as the guy is winding up and getting ready to throw the ball to home plate. So I've already seen Manny Machado. He got a strike called on him because he wasn't in the batter's box with 8 seconds or less to go. I've seen pitchers get called for a ball, automatic ball, because they didn't release the pitch before the clock struck zero. It's shortening the games. There's no question. But there are people that are going to have to adjust. There are pitchers who take a ton of time. This would not be a great time for like a guy like Mike Hargrove to be batting.
The human rain delay. Yeah, so 2 takeaways on that. This, when you think pitch clock, the assumption is, the pitchers better be on their P's and Q's. Well, the batters too. So this is a two-pronged thing. I went to some St. Paul Saints games and an Iowa Cubs AAA game last year. They had the pitch clock in play at the AAA level last season. So this is incumbent. The good organizations are already ahead of the curve here. They're working on this, not just in games, but in bullpen sessions and simulated games. So they're going to make sure when the bell rings in late March and these games start for good and they actually count late March. Oh, by the way, hey, baseball, move your regular season back to April. Start after the Final Four. March? My goodness. The only baseball in March should be in Arizona and Florida.
Yeah, thank you.
But so, it's the good teams are going to figure it out. It's a level playing field, right? There's 30 teams in Major League Baseball. They all know the rules going in. You may like them, you may not, but you got to adapt and adjust, and we'll see what it does for the interest in baseball. The early sample returns a year ago, spring training games were about 3 hours and 2 minutes. Now I think they're clocking in at about 2:35 in that range. So they're shaving 20 to 25 minutes off a game.
Right. And I'll make this argument, and I'm fine with it. If they want the games quicker, whatever. Why are Major League Baseball owners in such a hurry to get people out of their stadiums, and why are they in such a hurry to get their product off of television? You would think you would want people to stay in your stadium buying your pretzels and hot dogs and beer as long as possible. You would think that you would want your product on television for as long as possible. If people want to go home, let them go home. The people who stay, they'll stay. I don't think you're turning people off because the game goes a little longer. They're staying as long as they want. I can tell you right now, there are still going to be people at Target Field because, as you call it, trendy Target Field draws a lot of folks who aren't necessarily paying attention to baseball anyway.
Fringe fans at best. Well, and
they're leaving early anyway.
Exactly.
They don't care if it goes an extra 20 minutes or an extra 15 minutes. They're out of here. They're looking at their watch. They're out of here at 9:30 or 9 o'clock, no matter what.
Well, and the Twins, I know last season had a lot of games that started at like 6:40 p.m. early in this season. So the premise was get in there early, get out early, especially when you've got the cooler weather in April and May. And I think you're exactly right. These billionaire owners, you should want to keep people, you want to hold them hostage in your ballpark. Because when there's a rain delay, the Twins are famous for not telling you the game's going to be rained out. So you're in the ballpark waiting for a decision, and they'll wait 2 hours sometimes before they say, oh, no game tonight. Meanwhile, those fans who have been held hostage have bought a lot of beer, a lot of Pepsi, a lot of water, a lot of nachos, whatever your choice is.
You know what they're going to do? They're going to leave the building, and they're going to go home and turn on the NFL Network. That's what they're going to do. Is that what you really want, Major League Baseball? I get it. I understand that the attention spans are shorter, but I still have to come to grips with the fact that you don't want people to be in your building any longer than they absolutely have to be.
Well, the NFL Olympics are here, by the way.
I
the
know
Combine starts this weekend at Indianapolis. Oh, my goodness. Here we go again. And it's going to garner a ton of attention.
Yeah. Well, and you love the NFL, right? You love all the rules changes that have come to the NFL along with Major League Baseball.
I am not happy with the Shield. So they had the competition committees going to meet and go over some things. Now, I've been a big proponent of get rid of these ticky-tack calls, especially roughing the passer like we saw with Dexter Lawrence for the Giants against Kirk Cousins of the Vikings.
There were hardly any of those bad calls.
Well, according to the NFL, they looked at the 100 calls or so that were made roughing the passer in the season, and they said only 3 were actually egregious. And I'm like, oh, my goodness.
I saw 3 in one game.
Exactly. The NFL lives in its own galaxy. They're not going to change anything because they discriminate. They value quarterbacks and their safety more than anybody else on the field. That's the bottom line. The irony is, though, by adding all these games and all these mini camps and OTAs, quarterbacks are getting hurt more than ever, right?
Yeah, probably.
Patrick Mahomes had to limp his way to a Super Bowl.
Yes, he did. All right. We're back with more, including our takes of the day after this final timeout. Stay with us.
Taxes don't have to be taxing, not with Keller Tax Service. For over 20 years, Linda Keller has prepared taxes for all types of professions and businesses. She has perfected the virtual tax appointment through phone or video. With Keller Tax Service, you never leave home. Call Keller Tax Service at 320-352-0013 or check out Keller Tax Service online at kellertaxservice.com. Take the anxiety out of taxes with Keller Tax Service at kellertaxservice.com. Wrapping up another episode of 10K Takes Television. That means takes of the day. Are you an angry American, cranky Yankee, salty skipper, happy camper? What is it this week?
Well, do you feel bad for Timberwolves fans yet? You should. I mean, they've only been to the postseason twice since 2004, advancing with that huge play-in game last year to get into the first round where they lost to Memphis. And, of course, they lost in the first round a couple of years ago as well. So, look, I'm not sure that this thing is getting any better anytime soon. You have draft picks that are gone for the next 5-6 years in the Rudy Gobert deal. You've got Karl Anthony Towns you can't depend on to be in the lineup. He's been out since November 28th. You got Mike Conley as your point guard now. He's not really a scorer. He has a hard time defending people. He's small. And you got D'Lo playing for the Lakers now, filling it up. I'm sorry, Timberwolves fans. I don't think this is getting any better anytime soon. You can count on this year. If Cat doesn't come back, they will not be in the postseason.
And the mood meter says he's a cranky Yankee.
I think that's true.
All right. Well, that's a segue for me because I'm going to talk about an ex-New York Yankee. You know, haters are going to hate, right? The Twitterverse blew up like a nuclear bomb the other night at the Minnesota Golden State game in San Francisco. Barry Bonds, number 1 on MLB's all-time home run list.
Cheater.
And A-Rod, current T-Wolves co-owner, number 5 on the all-time baseball tater list. They were sitting courtside together.
Another cheater.
And all these faceless, nameless people hiding behind their iPhone and their keypad on their laptops went to Twitter to take their jabs, no pun intended, about guys who have a steroid past. You know, let it go. These guys were legends when they play. They may not get in the Hall of Fame, whatever. But you know what, folks? Move on. That's what I say.
Okay.
And on that note, we have to move on. So I'm going to FedEx out thank yous to Alex Yambrick, David Weld, Richard Coffey, Rocky, and Wally. I'm Eric saying so long. This is 10K Takes, your sports ticket.